The investigation has unfolded a bizarre story of international intrigue and terrorism that has its roots in the extreme right wing of Eastern Europe 40 years ago. The case has the mark of terror. Cornelius Dima Dragan was an unlikely target for an execution-style murder. He was a 49-year-old professor of library science and an expert on Romanian and German history. If he had a soft spot, friends say it was for women and strong drink. He was publisher of Tricolor Rule, a liberal-leaning newspaper with just a few thousand circulation. February 16, 1986, a quiet Sunday morning, Dima Dragan and his wife were having coffee. A young man in a gray overcoat, his face uncovered, knocked at the apartment door. As Dima Dragan opened the door, there was a rapid exchange in Romanian. Time seemed to freeze as the assailant stabbed the older man in the chest. As Dima Dragan tried to save himself, he was shot several times in the back, collapsed in a pool of blood. The killer fled, leaving Mrs. Dima Dragan wounded and their son hiding in a bedroom. What stunned the Romanian community was not only the brutal slaying, but the clear signal that was being sent. The dreaded Iron Guard was apparently back in business. Homicide detective Neil Tweedy.
It struck me as being odd that this individual would be stabbed first and then shot.
Yes, it struck me as being odd too, but when one looks at the background of the Iron Guard, it's consistent with what's alleged that they have done in the past. It's an act that's ritualistic, and it sends a message out to the rest of the Romanian community that they better not fall out of favor with the Iron Guard.
For most of the Romanian community, their cultural and social life centers around the Romanian Orthodox Church. The church helped them flee a repressive communist regime, and today it still provides a helping hand to political refugees. But beneath the tranquil facade, the community is divided. Labels such as right-wing fascist and communist sympathizer are common. Most people are simply afraid to speak out. Some have suffered reprisals, including firebombings, harassment, and letters of intimidation. Homicide officers Wayne Oldham and Neil Tweedy were surprised at the pervasive fear, but not when they understood the crime. Sergeant Tweedy.
It's an extremely horrible type of murder, and the person that did this was very calloused about what he did.
Would you describe this as a terrorist killing?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Many members of the Romanian community have told us that the Iron Guard are responsible for this assassination.
The Iron Guard was a fanatical right-wing group born out of the political turmoil of the 1930s. Known also as the Legionnaires, the Iron Guard swore blood oaths to their leader, Captain Cornelius. In the 1940s, they joined forces with the Nazis in a bid to purge Romania of communists and Jews. For a brief time, the Iron Guard shared power. Then, in 1941, in an all-out bid for control, they went on a rampage, slaughtering thousands. Their most vicious acts were reserved for Jews. Many of them were beheaded with meat cleavers and hung on butcher hooks. A 1950 U.S. Army document identifies the Legionnaires as a terrorist organization using criminal methods to eliminate its opponents. Another recently declassified document described the Iron Guard as a group that poses a threat to U.S. interests. Sergeant Tweedy says history provides a clue to the murder of Dima Dragan.
Can you understand why this assassination occurred?
Yes, that was one of my first questions. What was the man doing that was so controversial that would want would lead someone to commit a crime like this? And we learned that he was the publisher of the Tricolor newspaper, and there was some rumor to suggest that he was preparing to expose Iron Guard members in Canada.
In connection with what?
In connection with, initially, war criminal. They were identified as being war criminals in Romania, but more presently, a resurrection of the Iron Guard.
W5 spoke to one man who was an eyewitness to Iron Guard activities in Romania and is knowledgeable about the revival going on in Canada. He was so terrified for his life that he refused to appear on camera even in disguise. We agreed to interview him in secret and then have this actor repeat his exact words.
How would you describe their philosophy?
They organized death squads. The people wouldn't ask for a reason. They have to blindly follow what the captain tells them to do. Their philosophy was, according to what they preached, an Orthodox Christian country, eliminating all the foreign elements. That means all other nationalities. It doesn't matter what their creed was. They were anti-Semites from the beginning. called Jews kikes. They were a terrorist organization, and they are.
What do you mean when you say they are a terrorist organization?
They have a training camp near Toronto called camp, where they train people to shoot, just to be ready in case a communist revolution or something happens in Canada and the United States. They're grooming a second generation of the young ones. A lot of them have no profession, no skill whatsoever. They only want the strong organization in Canada that is the Iron Guard, in Montreal, Windsor, and Toronto.
In the final edition of his newspaper, Dima Dragan all but named names of Iron Guardists in Canada. He wrote of the assassination of Romanian intellectual Nicolae Iorga at the hands of the Iron Guard in 1940. He printed the names of the men convicted for the killing and went further. He said the same criminal element exists here in Canada and deplored the spread of propaganda with obvious neo-fascist and racist overtones. Journalist Nicolae Popescu, a staunch anti-communist, disputes the Iron Guard theory. He believes the editor was a spy about to defect and may have been silenced by Romanian secret agents. Why would the Romanian secret police want to kill him?
I mentioned and I have a thing, and that was my opinion, and I don't involve anybody in that opinion. I think Mr. Dragan was ready to keep that information, what he kept it for the Canadian secret police.
This theory has been advanced. If he was a communist and he was killed by the other ones, that should be exposed if it is. But the chances are minimal. It was the other side. It's an inside job.
Iron Guard.
Yes. Everything points there. Everything points to their history. Everything shows how they were working, and that's exactly how they are working now.
Cornelius Dima Dragan's final resting place was here, in an unmarked common grave numbered 1681. The terrorist violence that had taken his life left the Romanian community in a state of shock. But the death of this obscure newspaper editor was not the end of the story. Rumors began to circulate that there was a hit list, and Dima Dragan was just the first target. Dennis DeBott is a private investigator in Detroit. He's also an authority on the Iron Guard.
I received a letter from an informant in the Romanian community in Detroit who has been helpful in my research into the Iron Guard. This letter describes the formation of an execution team in New York City who formed under the name of Liberty. These would be a Romanian Iron Guard hit squad. It names some of the targets on their list, and indeed names 4 of the hitmen themselves.
DeBott turned the hit list over to the appropriate authorities in Canada and the U.S. Are you aware, or have you ever heard of, an execution team that was set up in New York under the name of Liberty?
No.
Are these names familiar? There are 4 names on this sheet of paper. Are they familiar to you because this note suggests that these 4 men are members of that execution team, and one of them may have been the person who killed Dima Dragan?
No.
Are any of those names familiar to you?
Any name from here is no familiar to me. But really any name from here.
Do you think it's possible that there is an execution team acting in the name of the Iron Guard, and that Dima Dragan was the victim of such a group?
No. I don't believe that. I don't believe that.
As police dug deeper, the Dima Dragan murder ceased to be an isolated event. A few months before his death, 2 armed men robbed a Wells Fargo truck outside the Bay in downtown Montreal. They got away with more than $300,000. Arrested and convicted of armed robbery was Romanian political refugee Dorin Iancu. Also arrested in connection with the crime was Romanian immigrant Anton Angel. A cache of arms, including rifles, machine guns, and hand grenades, was found in his apartment. We met Anton Angel at Cowansville Penitentiary in Quebec, where he is serving a 7-year sentence. He denies any connection with the Iron Guard and insists his motive for the robbery was purely personal.
Le vol, qu'est-ce que c'était le but?
I asked Angel what was the purpose of the robbery, why he did it.
Why? For money. What else?
Only for money?
Yeah, strictly for money.
And the money was just for you.
If you want to know if the robbery had a political motive, you should ask the question directly. I'm going to answer no. It was never anything of the sort, not in any way.
But the strange chain of events didn't end there. Last January 20th, a man came jogging up this street wearing an orange sweatsuit and a dark ski mask. He paused and fired 4 rounds into the Romanian consulate, shattering glass and wounding a visiting businessman. Police identified the weapon that he used as one of these, a Ruger Mini 14 with a folding stock. The date of that shooting was significant. It marked the 45th anniversary of the uprising of the Iron Guard in Romania. Police have turned up a suspect in a consulate attack, but as yet no arrests have been made. One day after the consulate shooting, police say the same suspect bought a second gun in Montreal. This one was an assault weapon, an Italian copy of a Russian submachine gun. And when Professor Dima Dragan opened his apartment door one quiet Sunday morning in Toronto, this is what he saw. Anton Angel, who was in custody at the time, could not have pulled the trigger. He also denies any knowledge of the murder. He has been repeatedly questioned by police, but he claims he is a victim of guilt by association. He also insists that none of the money from the Wells Fargo holdup was ever passed on to the Iron Guard. I asked him if he could tell me categorically that the money that is missing is not in the hands of terrorists.
That the missing money doesn't amount to much. People have been led to believe there's a lot of money missing. I can tell you that it amounts to something between $80,000 and $100,000. I don't believe it's in the hands of the terrorists. I just don't believe that. But it would make a good movie.
But can you tell me that for certain, I asked him.
Me? Yes, definitely.
Did anyone connected with the Iron Guard try to recruit you?
Recruit me? But you're using a big word because recruitment presupposes the existence of a structured combat organization. No, I think these people who were part of it, it was also a lot of people who belonged to it. It was not an organization, it was a mass movement. If you see it as a terrorist organization with 12 or 1,000 members, you're mistaken. It was a political party.
But there is evidence to suggest that the Iron Guard is much more than just a political party. These boys, pictured here at a meeting in Detroit a few years ago, represent the new generation of Legionnaires. This 1952 CIA document describes an Iron Guard plan to infiltrate American society, using the Romanian Orthodox Church as a cover. Iron Guard hate literature continues to be published and circulated in both Canada and the United States. The founder of the Iron Guard, Cornelius, is featured today in some ethnic newspapers as a subject of hero worship, and his followers continue to recruit new members in the refugee camps of Europe. Recent Romanian immigrant to the U.S., Dean Milovan.
When I came in the United States, in the camp in Italy, I was very suspect about some activities there. Everybody wanted to know your political orientation and if you are able to join the Legionnaire movement. And publicly to the Romanian representative there I say I didn't leave a communist country, I didn't leave the communists to become a Legionnaire. I wanted to be a free man.
Perhaps the most tantalizing motive for Dima Dragan's murder was the rumor that he was preparing to cooperate with the Deschênes Commission. The commission, headed by Judge Jules Deschênes, is investigating suspected war criminals living in Canada. It's expected to report soon. I put a question to a person here as to whether or not there might be people who would be considered war criminals of Romanian origin now living in Canada. Yes. And what he said was that that was absolutely ridiculous. Pardon me? He said that's ridiculous.
Absolutely ridiculous? I wouldn't connect them to the war crimes, but I would connect them to crimes against humanity. Because at that moment, when they committed the crimes in Romania, there was no war. Romania was not at war with anybody. And they committed quite a few crimes there, the Legionnaires, against the Jewish people. There are quite a few of those so-called Romanians who are on the Deschênes Commission list. That is known.
When you say on the Deschênes Commission list, what do you mean?
As war criminals, crimes against humanity.
Do you think that could possibly be the motive for this murder?
That could be also a part of it.
This week, the body of one of the original leaders of the Iron Guard was returned to Detroit to be buried. Archbishop Valerian Trifa was deported from the U.S. in 1984 for lying about his pro-Nazi Iron Guard past. Hundreds turned out to mourn the former head of the Romanian Orthodox Church in America. And many are wondering whether the Iron Guard will be buried with him, or whether he has left behind a new generation schooled in hate and violence. That has police worried.
Would you anticipate the possibility of another such killing in this country?
Anticipate the possibility? I don't think I would go as far as to say that, but it certainly wouldn't surprise me if there was another eruption of violence similar to this incident.